Welcome to Musical Minds and Missions, M Cubed. I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. M Cubed is brought to you by Phenotypic Recordings, a media company that brings to light new music by world-class musicians and innovative composers, with a focus on music that highlights the most important issues facing the world in our time. Today, I'm talking with the string quartet MoVE, and we'll start by listening to a composition from their new album, MoVE Premieres. This is from Josh Henderson's Rain, Sleet, Gloom, and Heat. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lina Bahn, Livia Sohn, Carolyn Stuart, and Janet Sung. You're the Modern Violin Ensemble, or MoVE. So, Lina, tell me, first of all, how you got together and tell me about the name.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having us on, by the way. It's just so fun to be here. The idea started a long time ago, actually. We were trying to figure out this more. We're like, was it 2015? And we actually think it was like 2014 when the idea just started coming to us about, hey, we are all educators. We're all friends, and we have this need for violin repertoire. In chamber music, normally it's, a lot of putting together trios and regular quartets. And there are a lot of violins that are always left over at schools. And there was that component to it. There was also this idea of, hey, why are there so many cello ensembles? And cellists are always having fun and getting together and, just having a cello party. And really, there's not that doesn't exist for violinists. So it started a little bit that way, and yeah, we talked to each other, and then it just kind of grew from there. It just started from that idea of let's see what music can do to change education, to change like what we can speak about in the world, and then also make a genre, make music.
And Livia, you were friends before?
Yeah, we all knew each other in some capacity. Like I knew Janet and I were at school together, and I knew Lina from our New York days, and then Lina and Carolyn knew each other, and so we all knew each other in some combination. And I think that was a really important part of the beginnings of our group, is that we wanted to be with each other. We wanted to make music together. We wanted to create something bigger than ourselves together. So it really starts from like our friendships, which leads to like connection to any composers we might have known, which kind of led to connections to other people in the group's connections, and it just kind of grew out of this. But the the seed of it is our friendships to each other.
Yeah, yeah. Lina, you talked about how being educators is important for the group. And why is that?
I think for a lot of musicians, artists, I'd like anyone who's done anything, probably in any field, when you are passionate about it and you have yourself gained so much knowledge from the lineage of your teachers, there's just a calling, to share and to learn from younger generations and just to be out teaching. I don't know if that's. I mean, we've we've all been at teaching for a long time, and I think that's a large part of it.
I think also we met so many composers when we were students. And at least for myself, that's how I started playing new music. And I think we all share that in common. So those networks grew out of an academic environment as well.
Mhm.
And many of our concerts also are for those audiences.
Yeah, and it's funny because like both kind of simultaneously, but independently started commissioning and playing works for our own studio. So it was like 8 violins and 7 violins and 6 violins.
Right, exactly.
It's like,
That I think, and then we started talking about that more and more, and
yeah,
then we just realized that we wanted to do that with our friends
yeah,
as well as our students, and so then uh, we talked to Janet and Livia, and the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And Carolyn, you're talking about how you started early on working with composers. But you each come from classical music backgrounds. You grew up trained in the classical canon and going to conservatories.
Mhm.
And how did you start working with composers early on?
I think I was initially interested even before I went to Juilliard in this. I was introduced to this by a teacher who was doing a lot of this sort of thing, and it kind of blew my mind that there was that whole aspect of music as well. So I think I had my eyes and ears to the ground when I was at Juilliard, even though I was sort of training more traditionally.
Sure.
And I met Lina there, of course, and it was really grad school where in Michigan where I started really working with composers because there's a huge composition program there.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me where it started. So I can't speak for everybody, but those actually some of those connections were some of our first composers as well. I started working with Evan Chambers at University of Michigan, and he was our first commission. So
This is Janet. I'd like to add to that. We have all been, when this idea started for the group, we had all been at a point in our performing and mentoring careers where we brought a quite an extensive background of collaborations and commissioning and working with composers. I think that was a large reason why we thought it would be appropriate to do at this point with this kind of group. There was not, as far as we could tell, a lot of music for this combination of a violin quartet. Have been things like cello ensemble music arrangements. We had heard that quite a bit, but not necessarily music for this particular number or instrumentation. And I think that was one of the things that was also exciting for us, just as performing artists, but also something to build the canon of this particular kind of group, because we frankly just didn't see a lot of it out there.
Yeah. What are the challenges, Janet, of four violins together? Because they're all in the same register. And Carolyn had talked about cello quartets. Um, and, yes, they're in the same register. I, I, I think this is somehow different. I mean, we don't hear four violins together, and we think of the traditional string quartet where it's sort of balanced in registers, and the two violins and the viola and the cello. So why four violins, and what are the sort of specific pleasures of doing that, having a quartet?
Well, I would say a violin quartet for us was a way for us to collaborate more, and to work on music and work on projects together as a group. And it was something that we wanted to do personally. I think, I'm not sure if it was for everybody else, but I had sort of the same question. Is anybody going to want to listen to a lot of for violin music? Because it has a certain register, has a certain range. And that, I think, was also the real question for composers. How would they handle that kind of instrumentation? Because with a traditional string quartet, obviously you have such a range for bass, and there's still potential even for an instrument like a cello that has that low register, but they still have potential on the instrument to go fairly high, so they can sort of create that balance of voices. So that, I think, was a real question. We weren't really sure how composers would handle that individually, but it was something that we wanted to explore because, we wanted to be able to collaborate with each other and work with composers with this kind of unique formation. What has been really surprising, at least for me, is that every piece that we've received from composers, they've been so distinct in the way that they've treated how to balance, four of the same instrument, but how to make them sort of create a sound that can be so different. So the characteristics of what they utilize from the instrument from each composer is quite different. Some of them use the instrument in a very textural way. Some of them kind of find different sonic things. We've done some where there's scordatura involved from the composer. So they have really, it's really kind of amazing how imaginative they have become with just using four of the same instruments and how they've expanded that sonic palette in a way.
Yeah. And I will say also to add to that, that with a string quartet, the composers are dealing with a built-in expected format. Like there is the role of each instrument a bit. And with this group, there's no precedence at all. So it's really up to the composer to envision how the four of us will be. Is it a mimic of a string quartet? Is it four in unison? Is it just all textural? Is it just a soundscape piece? Is it going to be us plus electronics, singing, narrative, which we have had to do? One of the pieces we just recorded, Carolyn had a bass pedal, so she went an octave lower. Like there's all these almost by putting this parameter of the four of us being playing the same instrument and dealing with the same range has almost opened up more possibilities, I think, for certain composers. So when we started this group, I sort of thought, well, it will show itself how needed or excited composers are about this, because if we can't find anyone who's excited to write for us, or the pieces are all very similar, that will kind of show itself. And our idea maybe was, more excited, like we were more passionate about it than what would be received. But I think after almost 20 new commissions, like it's like the array of compositions is really like astonishingly vast. So it's been inspiring for us just to like keep going and see what else can be created.
Yeah.
With
Livia, I was going to say, like, that just I think that's such a great point. I just had this image that like the composer would run screaming like, four violins, oh my god, so much E string, please no more. But I remember this one composer saying that he actually felt that like the history of Beethoven quartets and Haydn quartets in particular is almost like heavy for composers to like get out from under, like, and I think a lot of composers had a hard time writing quartets, as we know, from history, just because of what the foundation was. So I think that's interesting.
So they
But
feel
good.
kind of liberated by this combination that they
Yeah, what you're saying,
that it's brand new. Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you, Lina, that's an interesting point. Do you choose composers who write really well for the violin? I mean, Livia, you were talking about how they notate really well for the instrument and using techniques like scordatura and others and understanding the instrument so well. So
Yeah.
are there Lina, do you choose composers who you know understand the instrument well?
You know what? That's interesting because there are like, as Livia was saying, some of the composers write texturally. And so it's great. Actually, the composer whose house we're in right now, Stephen Tosca, like he was just saying that his piece, he wants it to be very violinistic and very idiomatic and kind of virtuosic and take advantage of the violins. And that's great, and sometimes we have pieces we have composers who are actually violinists themselves and string players, and that's great. But it's also wonderful to have someone who's a keyboardist or a wind player, or because they can imagine things that sometimes are beyond the boundaries and the parameters. And so, you know, I think it goes both ways. For me, I feel like we don't pick them just because they can write really well of course they can write really well for strings, but it's not because they're known for being string composers. We have
Yeah.
some pieces right now that just run the gamut. It's like staggering to us even playing it.
Yeah. I think one important thing to say about our group is that we are not for like violin times four. That's not what our goal is. Like all of the things about violin, like the virtuosity and like the solo line, and it's not that times four, but rather you take four of us and it becomes something else almost. Like the composite of four violins, the aim is to become something else, not sort of like violin maximized.
Yeah.
I think our curiosity.
This is Carol.
Yes, sorry. I think if for us also, we don't necessarily approach the music as violinists. I think we approach it as curious artists, and 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 maybe also that's. I mean, yes, we're all violinists, but again, we started as four friends that just had have all these curiosities and interests, and we want to expand the repertoire, and it happened to be that we were also violinists.
What's really interesting, I think, that every single piece that we've gone through and just talked about, they all have incredible depth of story and and background. So, again, it goes beyond idiomatic writing. It goes beyond the violins, like, Livia was saying, like the storyline, right? It's just the stories for
Absolutely.
each piece are just fascinating, and what inspired them and what it's about. Yeah.
That's I think the main impetus for us is like we love being together and we love playing together, but really it's like the opportunity to work with a living composer is something that we all understood individually was something special, but then as a group, because every piece that we play, we are in touch with who wrote it for us, what the inspiration was, or the reason, what compelled them to write this, and to have that backstory, and then to work on making the vision of the composer a reality. It one is really inspiring, and two is a great connector just for for humans, I think. And then and communication and everything. And then also, just you can bring that outside of new music. Like if I'm playing something more traditional, it's the same. Like I don't get to talk to Brahms, but you have to imagine like at one point there was the same relationship with somebody learning something that he just wrote. That relationship is the crux of music, I think. And so to be carrying that onward is, I think, very crucial.
Yeah.
I think this is Janet again. I think also in the context of a composer writing certain pieces, you mentioned Brahms. I mean, we were talking the other day. Well, Brahms wrote a lot of his chamber music because he had good friends that happened to play that instrument. And we know that in history, there's a lot of like huge war horses in our string orchestra or string repertoire that are a lot of the reasons why, or not even just string music, but like any music that like Mozart had a great clarinetist friend, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so he wrote a lot of that clarinet chamber music and the concerto, things like that, because he happened to have a colleague and friend that played that instrument, right? And I think all of us as musicians sort of have always approached, I think, our own music and sharing of that in the same way. It's not about featuring the violin necessarily. It's really about, is there something that we can help present that this composer is wanting to share? And their individual stories or why they've written the piece has been fascinating to see. For some, it's a very personal reason. It's something in their own cultural background that they want to really be able to share that maybe they haven't had the opportunity in the same way. Maybe there's a particular moment in history for them that they feel like can be more shared. So for instance, Josh Henderson's piece, it's a multimedia. We have to play, we have to sing. There's a double like electronic thing. Like there's a whole vast amount that goes into that work. But at the crux of that work is the story about the history of the Pony Express and the postal workers at that time, what they had to go through to really like be a part of that organization and do such an important job in our history, right? And so things like that just were very interesting or personal to each of these composers, I think is what we want to be able to share. We just are doing it through the violins because that's what we've done our training in. But for the most part, it's really about trying to really find the ways to communicate, what is, in their head, what is in their music that that they want to have shared.
Yeah. Yeah. No, really, I mean, it's fascinating about the stories of living composers and the stories of composers no longer with us. And you talk about Brahms and that he had pretty much given up composing and then heard the clarinetist Richard Mühlfeld and was so inspired that he wrote his great clarinet quintet and the two clarinet sonatas, later in his later years. But I mean, these friendships or his work with Clara Schumann, it's so so embedded in our musical life and culture. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess this leads me to ask about how you feel, and maybe Carolyn, you can talk about this a little bit, how music can address larger social issues and how you feel that your work can, um, you know, help with our society and our culture and what is working and what's not working.
That's an incredibly important question to think about for all of us. I think music is first and foremost for me about quality of life, and I think it is for so many people. But beyond that, I think you're right. I think that music can influence change. And I think the ripple effect of each of these works can be far and wide. It might be a little slower than maybe a protest or something like that, but I think uh, it can seep into the audience's thoughts in a very profound way, and perhaps affect their life choices or um, the meaning behind how they carry forward. Some of these pieces are, as we've said, really just about pure art or sonic experience or exploring what the violin can do, making sounds that we've never made before, which is thought provoking in itself. And some of the works are really based in ideas of social justice or um, being thoughtful about the environment. Maybe not necessarily hitting the audience over the head with, we must save the climate, but more being very thoughtful about the life of trees, as in one of our pieces, or maybe something a little bit more controversial, like anti-gun violence is a theme of a piece, or queer love, or racial justice, Black history. And then some of the works are really about sort of cultural influences, which in itself is also a way to make people more thoughtful about how we all live together in this world. So we have works that are infused with folk influences from Mongolia or Iran and or Ukraine, places like this, where I think just hearing the beautiful music of these places can make people think a little differently about something that they might just think of as a place of war. They can then see their neighbors as human beings. So I think it's a ripple effect, and I think it's slow, but it's deep, is how I think of it.
Yes.
Beautiful. Agreed.
Yeah. Lina, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I think that you said it so well, Carolyn. Really,
Yeah.
I think that resonates with all of us. Music and history. I'm just thinking like the top one that comes to mind is Shevsky, of course. And music can be right alongside, with fast change. As long. I mean, it can be really anything. That's the amazing thing about music. So I don't really have much to add.
Yeah.
Um,
Frederick
yeah.
Shevsky said, music probably can't change the world, but we have to act as if it can.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
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 I mean, what I love about it is that it's a act of beauty. Like you are meeting whatever terrible thing and you are creating beauty. So it's not met with that same level of violence or ugliness, whatever, despair. You are meeting this difficult thing with a creation and a contribution to humanity. And I think that to support just that in itself, we are very honored to be part of that process and that gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can say so much that words can't, and go beyond language, and especially at a time when people are afraid to speak.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that's also really important as, performers that share the music or help try to bring it to life. And the intention with composer, I think even composers at the end of the day, they may have some inspiration for their piece, but I think they also understand it's going to be received in whatever way that listener is going to experience it. So I would say the example is like Jessica Meyer's piece, in Equal Measure. Her piece, the inception of it is actually to sort of highlight equal pay for women, and the law that got changed in Iceland, where they finally actually created a law where women would receive equal pay. And I think this was about 8 years ago or
Yeah.
something like that, 7 or 8 years ago. And but when you listen to the piece, you could also just experience, if you didn't know the backstory, you would experience it just as this really like very spirited, very virtuosic. I mean, she's also a violist as well as a composer. So she knows string playing extremely well, knows how to write for strings. And it's a very just exciting, driving work with certain things that we do as part of the music that are not necessarily playing, but it adds a very dynamic component to the piece. So for those in the audience or those who are experiencing it, they're like, whoa, what an exciting piece of music. And to experience that, especially live, I think it works especially good in a live performance. But then it becomes a whole nother layer when you understand what the inspiration is and what the things that we do that are non-playing, like what that signifies. And then if anything, it's hopeful that the people who are experiencing it or hearing it, that they may ask a question about it. And so then that leads to what Carolyn was referring to, just like really maybe something that they start thinking about differently or understanding differently or making choices differently.
Do you find that your audience is a classical music audience? I mean, how do you bring in audiences who might be resistant to new work?
I think a lot of it is context. I mean, and for decades, for a long, long time, I think every classical musician has been exploring what context means. A lot of groups now are like very intentionally performing outside of the concert halls, and so who it's for is a lot of where you put it and where you decide it's going to be, um, because a very formal door at Lincoln Center is going to be, really intimidating for many people to walk through. So just by that, you're going to get a who is it for, or what kind of audience are you getting? So one thing that we talk a lot about is context, and yeah.
And how do you do that? Like, can you give me an example of how you put it in a different context?
Sure. Well, Livia has uh, a, a a series that she started and runs, and there's a large component of community outreach and engagement. We're all educators, like we said, so actually, talking to our own students and playing in universities and conservatories and musical settings for younger generations immediately puts on the radar for our students, like what we're doing and what we're up to. Um, and you know, really, it doesn't have to be in a traditional proscenium stage hall, as we all know, and this has been going on for decades, and it certainly doesn't start or will end with anything that we're doing. But I think I'm glad to see that classical music is really um, it's on the front like consciousness of a lot of musicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
communicating with the audience is really key, whether you're playing to a group of kindergartners or, you're playing outside and or you're playing in a library or you're playing in a concert hall. Like I think that to somehow connect what you're doing and who you're playing and then who's listening to it, like this trifecta, I think has to really be symbiotic. And so, whatever, wherever you are, as long as you can try and create that togetherness, I think is what makes a successful performance.
Mm, yeah. I'm a pianist, and I encounter young pianists. Maybe the piano world is different, but young pianists who are so resistant to 20th, anything past Bartok and Debussy, and
Yeah.
maybe Prokofiev and Rachmaninoff, because
Yeah.
they feel that no new piece of music is going to be as great as their Beethoven sonatas and their, Bach partitas. And it's it's really, really challenging. And you
Yeah.
can say, well, here are these Ligeti etudes, here are these, here's The People United Will Never Be Defeated by Frederick Chevsky. Here's um, you know, all the I mean, any your Florence Price piano sonata, just like introducing them to music beyond what they know is very, very, very
Yeah.
challenging.
Hmm.
And
I,
I mean,
I
no, I mean, I just have to say that it's like the idea that you're going to spend hours and hours and hours learning something, and
yeah.
is
Yeah.
why not spend it on Waldstein
Yes.
sonata?
Right.
Why?
Right.
Yeah.
I I feel like pianists have a face a specific challenge though in
Mhm.
that regard.
Agreed.
There is so much repertoire for piano
Agreed. Yeah.
that you could spend the next 100 years just in one genre. And, so I feel like as a pianist, that would be tough to, say, I'm choosing to leave this thing behind that is, I should know. And whatever the the mental blockage may be, to say I'm going to spend my time and effort and talents to take a risk. And I think that, and also piano is so isolating. It's maybe that's the wrong word, but you spend so much
It is.
time, so I think that all of that combined, it makes it more there would be more risk involved. I feel like if I mean, I don't know, because I'm not speaking for any pianist, but I just feel like if I go through it in my head, I can see where a young pianist would end up on the side of like, oh, let me just play these 2,000 pieces that I should know, Um, I mean, that's my initial, like, when you say that's my initial take on it.
Maybe, yeah, I think that's a double-edged sword for pianists because you have such a vast repertoire, and such great repertoire, in the history of the instrument. Um, but I think where we've performed also, what we have really, um just been inspired, I think, by the most is when we do have audiences, especially younger generations, and us as being artists as well as teachers. We kind of have that conversation, I think, a lot with the younger generation just by the nature of a lot of the things that we do. But I think there in it sometimes an inherent curiosity from these young musicians. I think also because we are this instrumentation, it is sort of like what we had mentioned way back earlier, that we don't have the shackles of some historical context or the weight of certain repertoire that we have to choose from, or that if somebody's listening, they can get inspired by, oh, we can put together like a group of us and try to experience this music or try to understand this music, right? And so for a group like this, it does sort of create a little bit of freedom in that way. And hopefully that is what starts conversations and the interest, for younger generations, younger musicians, to try to explore the same thing. Um, I've always also, I've experienced it myself, but also when I'm working with younger musicians, who are trying to understand contemporary music and how to approach it and how to, for some, it's a totally brand new experience. But when they do it, they do experience that music, without so much of the weight of tradition. And so in an interesting way, it helps them, I also feel like, when they go back to other music that is a bit more traditional, right? Just the way that they approach it. Oh, I don't have to just sort of approach it within this framework that has been handed down to me. But maybe there's something else, that the way I can imagine it, right? Which is, I think, ultimately, as musicians, what we're trying to do. We don't want to limit our imaginations and our curiosity. We want to continuously expand it. So
Yeah.
maybe that's another context in which to share it with,
No, that's
those younger
really interesting.
musicians.
And it's, of course, not an either or. And it's
Mhm.
not like you're never going to play Beethoven string quartets again.
No, that's exactly it. The either or thing is like, my wish is that music could just be music, and these delineations that we create within our already kind of confined music genre of classical music is like, drives me nuts sometimes. It's like, why are we early music, but why are we new music? But like, it's just music. And why do you, I mean, if you choose to do one of those things because you love it and it speaks to you, that is one thing. But to kind of put people in these pockets, it it drives me crazy. Like, I'm a musician. I mean, I was telling the girls the other, like, we're servants. We are, we serve what the composer is intentions are, to the best of our ability. So the more kind of story we know, the better we can do that. So working with living composers gets you a little closer, because you can ask directly, you can hear directly, and so it's one step closer. So that's the appeal for me. Also, I just think it's important to keep music alive. But I mean, I don't consider myself one thing or another, and my wish is that kind of less people would just me, and also for the audience, like, it's not just go, and if it's a new music piece on there, or if it's all new music, or just go and listen and receive. And I mean, that might be kind of a lofty wish, but that's I hate these, like, these imaginary, partitions that we put
Yes.
up.
Can I add just one really interesting thing? I was just thinking about your original question of audience, and one composer in particular is pushing us for a new audience. And we were working with Yara Kapuscinski at Stanford, who wrote us a piece for VR. And like that is a really specific audience. He's pushing, music into, our technological age that's coming. And for most people, that's a very specific audience that's going to go and listen to VR music, virtual reality.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
fascinating experience for us.
Yeah.
Is great. But
Yeah.
again, it intersects with your question, Sarah, about like who is this for,
Yeah.
and what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is that sort of going outside your comfort zone? Is that stretching you, or does it come naturally using new technology?
I wouldn't say it's like in our wheelhouse, but I would say that we are all game.
Yeah.
And
The
so,
suits. Do you guys remember the suits that we had to wear?
oh yeah, we all had to wear this one solid color, the same color. So we got these like Teletubby looking outfits off of Amazon.
Who gets to be Poe?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Green screens, the whole thing.
Everything but the
It was
antenna.
incredible.
And we were really far away from each other, which was difficult as, chamber musician. There were some challenges about it, but I will say with that work, what I found fascinating was here was somebody who's trying to push the limits of technology. And one of the main points of that piece was just to not airbrush our sound. So he wanted us as human and gritty and mistake ridden as possible. And it was a little bit vulnerable for us because we are so used to this concept. You go into a recording studio and you're going to be made to be, glossed up as much as technically possible. And he did not want that. He wanted, really, we got pressed to show our real selves and the grittiness of violin and the difficulties of, all of that stuff combined with this like cutting edge technology. I thought was really interesting.
Amazing. Carolyn, let me ask you about being an ensemble of 4 women. What is that like? And are there advantages, disadvantages? Tell me about being 4 women.
Well, I don't think that was the intention in the beginning. I think it really boiled down to these friendships and just, and then we're all violinists. Oh, we're all women. Look at that, So it sort of started that way. But boy, the conversations, that we that we have. I mean, we have these retreats where we work and or work and then record, workshop things, and so we're living together in these in various locations, usually in our homes or in, like right now we're in the home of a wonderful composer friend. And we cook together and we
Borrow makeup.
we're we're having slumber parties, the whole bit. And I just think that is as much a part of the experience for us as the music, you almost can't separate one from the other. So I think in that way, we also operate differently from maybe an established string quartet,
But for sure, there's something about it that conjures up within composers when they see us as 4 women playing violin.
Yeah.
I think the strength of that for a lot of composers, it conjures up like, this is how I'm going to write for, or as we talked about, with Jessica Meyer's piece, about women's equality. So I think just existing and being together and having a friendship it is both a signifier for a lot of people, and it holds it holds some meaning.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think I will add to that I think that within this group, the friendship is the thing that was first. clearly, because that's how we all came together. But I think it's the thing that we all lead with as well. We all are quite busy in many of the other facets of our careers. This is something we do purely because we want to come together, just to be with each other and to collaborate together and to create this kind of music. But it isn't necessarily, we have to make this our career ensemble. With traditional quartets, that's a choice that they've made, right? That the quartet ensemble, how they form it, who they form it with is based on can this stand the test of time, and can we go 20 years performing as a quartet, that kind of thing. But I think for us, it really just came from those seeds of friendship. I think it might be interesting to note that how long we've known each other it goes quite far back, because I met Lina and Carolyn first when I was 11 or 12. 11. I was 11, I think.
Back in the 80s.
Back in
Wow. I don't know.
Don't give away the decade, Carolyn.
Which Janet now runs.
I met Carolyn and Lina for the first time at a summer, an intensive summer strings program. It's called Meadowmount School of Music up in upstate New York. And I was about 11. They were mid-teens, this kind of thing. And then Lina and Livia, you were still in pre-college, you said, when the two of you crossed paths.
Mutual friend, musician friend's house. I guess it would have been towards the end of pre-college. I would have been in my latter years of high school.
Yeah.
I thought Lina was so cool.
So the point being is that we have been intertwined in some way. Even if a number of years have gone by since I had seen Carolyn and Lina, I reunited with them years later during school, and then doing summer festivals, where we were actually performing and teaching at summer festivals together. Livia and I were overlapping at Juilliard together, and you were still an undergrad. And so there's quite a long history of all of our friendships. And I think that's sort of the bond that really is why we continue to gravitate towards each other, and want to continue with this.
Mm-hmm. It's a very strong bond. I bet you could never have imagined when you were 11 together that you'd be doing this now.
Oh, if you showed me a score of anything we played today.
Yeah. That we'd be in green screen, Teletubbies.
Exactly.
Oh. Well, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for your time.
We'll wrap up with another composition from this new album, MoVE Premieres. This is from Aftab Darvishi's As Snow Falls. Thank you for listening to M Cubed from Phenotypic Recordings, co-founded by Michael Hostetler and Stephen Pretzman. The music you heard on today's show is available on Bandcamp and wherever music is streamed. There are links in the show notes. Today's program was produced by AJ Machado, and I'm your host, Sarah Cahill. Please follow or subscribe so you know whenever we post a new show. You can reach us at info@phenotypicrecordings.com, and we're always glad to hear from you.